My name is Wright. I am the voice of reason. I speak for the Last Crusade.
If you were the devil's advocate, you would advise your client, the devil, never to argue the merits of the case. The devil cannot summon the truth to his side to battle his opposition. Truth banishes the father of lies. The devil must silence any truthful speaker before he speaks. This he does by denying speakers any platform to speak, by driving honest debate away from the public square, and by luring the onlookers to close their minds and stopper their ears. A recurring lie of the devil's party is that opposition speakers are increasing the danger to society by promoting dangerous ideas. Merely the discussion is a danger, since time is short. The current emergency is immediate and immense. That is why the mass starvation, or new ice age, or flooding, or drought, caused by global warming or global cooling, or both, are always said to be 10 or 20 years in the future. This is true even of predictions made 20 or 40 years ago, not one of which has ever come to pass. In order to promote the idea that the emergency is immediate, it is useful merely to scream hysterically and foam at the mouth like a rabid dog. This energetic display of twitching, glaring-eyed insanity deters the calm men who have day jobs from engaging the speaker in debate. The claim of emergency is also used to subvert the basic liberties on which any Christian and civilized polity is based: the freedom to exchange and to debate one's views. The sole freedom in which all other freedoms are rooted is the freedom to tell the truth. But the most important point is that the danger which the emergency holds over all our heads and threatens so menacingly to drop is and must be utterly imaginary and unreal. Consider, to be afraid of plague or war will not do. Plagues can be fought by doctors and wars be fought by soldiers. And in the case of real emergencies, the real steps to be taken to face them are rational ones. Real problems can be faced, real enemies fought, and real challenges met, and with the grace of God overcome. On the other hand, when the danger is as imaginary unreal as the Heffalump from Winnie the Pooh, the mere fact that nothing can be done to alleviate the unreal danger means that anything can be proposed. It means that the proposition cannot be discussed rationally. It means that whatever is proposed is regarded as a necessity. This conveniently allows all discussion of efficient versus inefficient means to solve the problem to be shelved indefinitely, since any honest discussion of the problem, any honest analysis of what needs to be done, would leave those who invented the problem with nothing to do and nothing to complain about. In the eyes of ordinary men who are accustomed to look at problems as something to be studied and solved, the behavior of the devil's party, that is, the concept of seeking out utterly imaginary heffalumps and labeling them as problems in order to prevent solutions, is so contrary to common sense as to render it invisible. The sheer audacity of the deception acts as camouflage. But the motive here is not difficult to understand. The purpose is complaint, not solution. The purpose is hysteria. We are dealing with a psychological imbalance, or severe moral gangrene, or both. By inventing an imaginary problem, by hunting a heffalump, the perpetrator gains several advantages in dealing with his own internal demons. First, he seems wise, as he is far-sighted enough to detect the spoor of a heffalump, invisible to normal mortal men. It is for this reason that the perpetrators of such frauds often cloak themselves in some sort of pseudo-scientific authority. In these days, often by having a group of politicians or newspapermen or someone else without any scientific qualifications announcing to the public that the perpetrator is an esteemed scientist or agrees with a consensus of anonymous experts. So the art of hunting heffalumps will naturally seem attractive to fools who, more than anything else, wish to seem wise in their own eyes. But such wisdom is a fake. He wishes for the Wizard of Oz to grant him a diploma, just as was given to the Scarecrow. The difference is that the Scarecrow of Oz actually possessed native wit and wisdom, despite his brains of straw. Second, the perpetrator of this fraud seems a prophet in the land of infidels. It is for this reason that the various dooms and drawbacks predicted are always obscure and indirect, always a decade or two in the future, never something here and now which anyone can see with his eye. When his warnings are disregarded by all but true believers, the prophet can wrap himself in the flag of victimhood, pretending to be misunderstood, a man before his time, a martyr, and so on. For men of low self-esteem, discovering a convincing excuse to explain why no one listens to him is an intoxicating brew indeed. But here the perpetrator rewards himself the palm of martyrdom without the effort, pain, and sacrifice of actually being martyred. And his self-sacrifice and self-sanctimony can be nicely disguised as philanthropy, motivated by love of fellow man. All the sane men who oppose or ignore him can be dismissed and belittled as hard-hearted and mean-spirited. But the compassion of the martyr is not in him, no, not even a drop, because the problem his alleged big heart allegedly urges him to solve exists only in a hallucination, not in reality. So again, his compassion is fake. He wishes for the Wizard of Oz to grant him an honorarium as a good deed doer, just as was given to the philanthropical Tin Woodman. The difference is the Tin Woodman actually possessed sentiment and compassion despite his empty breast. Third, the perpetrator seems a crusader in a land of indifferent and slumbering ignoramuses. While he fights the problem, a spark enters his life, a thrill, and a sense of purpose. For now he serves a great cause, and he is trying to right a wrong or save the world. For craven, fearful, and pusillanimous people, the chance to fool oneself into donning the outward coat of bravery is alluring beyond measure. But, as before, it is all a fake. He wishes for the Wizard of Oz to grant him the Medal of Honor, just as was granted to the Cowardly Lion. The difference is that the Cowardly Lion, when facing a witch, actually showed some bravery. Finally, the perpetrator might get worldly rewards as well, fame or wealth or power, the power to interfere with the lives of other men. It is frightening and shocking how often governments and great social movements are set in motion or taken over by crackpot ideas perpetrated by hunters of the dread Heffalump. In each case, the perpetrator either ascribes to himself or to the state superhuman powers to change nature or to change human nature. It is intoxicating indeed to be the perpetrator, to pretend to himself that he has the magic power to achieve the impossible. He claims he has the power to slow the rise of the oceans, to overcome the patriarchy, to abolish the white supremacists, to stop the witch hunts of McCarthy, to undo the machinization of the elders of Zion, or to bring an end to all the evils produced by capitalism, in order that utopia be achieved. In which case, like the wizard himself, he claims to work miracles. But the wizard is a humbug, and his alleged magic is a puppet show run by the man behind the curtain. Once again, the difference, of course, is that the Scarecrow, the Tin Woodman, and the Cowardly Lion did, in the Wizard of Oz story, indeed face an evil witch, and indeed did save an innocent girl from Kansas, and they actually had all the qualities they sought for in themselves, but didn't recognize in themselves. Unlike in the story in real life, our would-be wizard would be a wicked man, not just a poor wizard, who invents tales of wicked witches to frighten fools living in the Emerald City into accepting him as their protector and their liege. The repeating pattern forms a summary of the history of the 20th century. Let us note the highlights in chronological order. At the turn of the last century, industrialization was improving the lives of the poor, making fortunes for the rich, and making famine a thing of the past. The classical liberal philosophy of equality of rank and equal protection under the law had swept all opposition into the dustbin of history. No rational argument could be framed against it. Serfdom and slavery were abolished worldwide. Hence, only an irrational argument was raised, primarily by the Victorian writer Karl Marx. He was not a philosopher nor an economist in any honest sense of those words. He was a malcontent, and borrowed just enough ideas from Hegel or Adam Smith to cobble together his Heffalump, which he called capitalism. Marx blamed the free market for everything from breaking up the family unit, to child labor, to poor wages, to slave labor, to tyranny. In reality, the free market had already abolished the social ills of which Marx complained, and was the only social institution capable of doing so. Hindering, crippling, or abolishing the free market merely reintroduces those ills. We have seen, repeated endlessly as experiments in Russia, Cuba, Venezuela, and in even slower and gentle form among the European nations, the results, both mild and violent, of socialism. Marxism is nothing more than blaming the doctor for the disease. Marxism is a worldview that identifies an utter imaginary problem, that is, the alleged conspiracy of the economic activity of investing, as if that activity were membership in a ruling social class, a class which systematically conspires against, exploits, and defrauds, and oppresses another class, That is not a class at all, but an economic activity, namely wage earning. The mere fact that a wage earner can invest his earnings by buying stocks shows the Marxist enemy is a heffalump. Also, the fact that the corporations, large or small, are in competition with one another for limited customer dollars, and also the logical paradox of saying that abolishing the price system will lower prices to the poor. Marxism deals with these and all other criticisms by alleging that all critics are biased by the ideological superstructure of their thinking, which is conditioned into existence by the means of production used by the economic class of which the critic is a member. Hence, the critic is impeached as biased and as unscientific before any argument is heard. Marxism also indulges freely in paranoid conspiracy thinking by alleging a sinister unity of purpose rests behind all human activity, all of which is ultimately economic. It is to be noted in passing that Marx himself did not write his treatises and manifestos to make money. That is, his motive was not ultimately economic. It is child's play to find the flaws and self-contradictions in this morass of jabberwalking and nonsense that surrounds and justifies the Marxist worldview. Yet this psychopathology and pseudo-religion conquered the second and third worlds in a single generation and stood within a step of total and unending world hegemony before it stumbled. Note the pattern. Note that the perpetrators of socialism, like the Wizard of Oz, have humbug superhuman powers, namely, they pretend to be able to bring about utopia on Earth and to abolish poverty and social injustice. Their constant talk of revolution pins the metal of the cowardly line to the breast, as if marches and riots, book burnings, and censorship via mob shouting and looting by max thugs were a crusade and not craven crimes. Their alleged compassion for the poor and downtrodden flourishes the honorarium of the Tin Woodman, as if socialism were meant to aid the poor rather than grind their faces into the dirt. Their alleged scientific knowledge of history and their gobbledygook of pseudo-intellectual phrases, Orwellian doublethink, and gassy double-talk puts the diploma of the scarecrow in their hand. During World War II, a particularly virulent brand of socialism known as National Socialism, also called fascism, made a bold and direct attempt at world conquest. In that case, the Heffalump was an alleged conspiracy by international Jewry to undermine the German people. This particular unsightly madness has been revived in the current generation with hysterical theories about white genocide. The pattern is again the same. This time the Scarecrow's diploma goes to the junk science, fretting about IQ scores, genetic purity, miscagination, and Darwinian blither. The Tin Woodman's honorarium is given to the patriotic love for one's fatherland or mother race. The Cowardly Lion's medal goes to bold warriors who target what is perhaps the weakest and most inoffensive tribe of men on the planet, namely the Jews, who will not strike back, or only tentatively, even against their most fanatical foes. Please note the rules of engagement used by the State of Israel against the mad bombers and jihadists seeking their blood. Such rules would be comical if the affair were not so serious. Note the pattern. After the war came the Cold War, and the Heffalump in the mind of the press became America, namely a thing called McCarthyism. McCarthyism was the normal operation of the law in response to what history has since proven to be the activities of paid agents of the Soviet Union, who were attempting to infiltrate the State Department and to influence Hollywood and so on. Hence the perpetrators pretending that the normal operation of the law against foreign spies and agents was paranoia and stupid, and was bigotry based on hatred and xenophobia, and only the bravest of reporters could rip free the mask of hypocrisy of the mighty and powerful who lurked behind this abuse of the law. The same pattern is present again in the pretense of wisdom by the foolish, of compassion by the heartless, and of courage by the craven. No reporter defying Senator McCarthy was in any danger of anything aside from being rewarded a Pulitzer Prize by his like-minded peers. After the fall of the Berlin Wall, cultural Marxism came to the fore, taking the forms of various psychopathologies of environmentalism, feminism, and social justice warfare. The Heffalump of environmentalism changes every few years. The Greens were wrong about the DDT scare, the Alar scare, the radon scare, the mercury in fish scare, the acid rain scare, the hole in the ozone layer scare, the power cables or mobile phones causing cancer scare, the chlorofluorocarbon scare, the overpopulation scare, the salmonella scare, the mad cow disease scare, and so on, and so on, and so on. The absurdity of the claims made by the global warming scaremongers is beyond parody. Every storm and flood is blamed on global warming, even in decades when the average global temperature is dropping, and the severity and frequency of storms is also dropping. The surest sign that an alleged problem is a heffalump to begin with is the speed at which it falls into the memory hole of public opinion once the alarmists stop ringing the alarm. Who has read any headlines about the immediate dangers of overpopulation causing mass starvation in India by the 1980s recently? But a real problem that really exists, such as the high homicide rate or failing schools among inner cities, continues to be discussed as long as the problem persists, because that problem is real. The heffalump the feminists oppose is, of course, the patriarchy and the rape culture and the forms of oppression so small that without any sense of irony, the heffalump hunters call them microaggressions. That the most privileged generation of women in all human history, and the generation most well protected by unfair laws and customs set firmly in their favor, should nonetheless complain about oppression, shows that the complaint is the point, not the solution. There is no solution. One cannot break a glass ceiling when there is no glass ceiling. Even this metaphor gives away its innate dishonesty. The so-called ceiling preventing the rise of women to positions of wealth, power, and esteem is called glass precisely because it is invisible. Now, this could be because it is real, but so well hidden that no evidence exists to confirm its reality. The same thing could be said for flying saucers crewed by Bigfoot. The other option is that it is invisible because there is no such thing. Patriarchy is to feminism what capitalism is to Marxism, an imaginary scapegoat. In places where real oppression of women exists, that is, among Mohammedan communities governed by Sharia law, nothing is said. Even to mention the ugly reality of genital mutilation, wife-beating, honor-killing, and rape gangs is to invite the accusation of racism. Which brings us to the heffalump of the current news cycle, the white supremacist. As with the feminist, the black in America lives under the best circumstances his race has ever enjoyed in history. Racism is a problem to be solved by color blindness, that is, by treating each man as an individual and rewarding or punishing him based on his individual actions and merits, not based on an arbitrary and involuntary group classification. Within the last decade or so, it became commonplace among the heffalump hunters to declare that the color blindness was a new and subtler form of racism, and that only white folk could be racist, due to the condemnation all whites deserve for being members of an arbitrary and involuntary group classification. It also became fashionable to claim that whites were born to a life of privilege merely because of our skin color. I first heard this claim spoken by a young black woman going to an Ivy League school, talking in tones of sneering condescension to an older white woman of rural background who was bankrupt and living in a hovel. A member of the elite was lecturing a member of the lower class about privilege. The absurdity of the accusation is absolute when it is spoken in a nation where laws and lawsuits favoring blacks above whites are routinely enforced, and hiring or promoting an unqualified black above a qualified white or oriental is commonplace. Recently, this racism against whites has reached the tipping point, where a group of pro-white racists, called the alt-right, has arisen in direct response to the endless accusations by pro-black racists that everyone not a pro-black racist was a racist. This may look at first glance as if the heffalump in this case is real, but the irony is that this is hardly real racism. No one of these so-called white supremacists, at least none that I can find authentically quoted, are calling for laws to assure the superior status of the white race over the Untermenschen. All they are doing is echoing the logic of the left and asking that if Black Lives Matter, and if the laws can support and enforce racial quotas in hiring and college admissions and the like, to help blacks merely because they are black and for no other reason, why not also say white lives matter and have the law enforce quotas to help whites merely because they are white and for no other reason? Is this real racism? If you say Black Lives Matter is legit, then you must say the alt-right is legit. If you say the alt-right is racist, you must say the Black Lives Matter movement is racist. For my money, one is the father of the other and shares a family resemblance, with the marked difference that Black Lives Matter is a violent group that murders cops, and their violence is called peaceful by the fake news, whereas the alt-right are a peaceful group called violent by the fake news. The sign that the problem is a heffalump is precisely the means allegedly needed to combat it. If a man asks you to buy him an expensive elephant rifle to hunt a fox that has been eating your chickens, you know he merely wants a fine firearm. If he also asks you for a bottle of wine and tickets to the theater, you know he is not going to spend the evening hunting your fox at all. In the case of all these examples, the Heffalump hunters allegedly are hunting the capitalists, the Jews, the witch hunters, the polluters, the patriarchs, the white supremacists, but in no case is any limited government solution being requested. To hunt the fox, one needs only a limited number of hounds or horses. To hunt the Heffalump, nothing is ever enough. Only absolute power will do. In these named cases, what is being requested is an absolute power over the racial mixture of the population, as well as over all human economic and industrial activity, including such activities as cattle farming and breeding. What is being requested is an absolute power over all courtship and family and sexual relations, and all social relations whatsoever, anywhere any trace of privilege might reside. And the absolute power being requested cannot be used justly, precisely because the standards of justice is what the perpetrators seek to abolish. If a fox is raiding the henhouse, you want it dead, and you take steps to hunt it. A wild animal merely living nearby who poses no threat and has no history of raiding, the farmer has no reason to hunt. This is the way real problems are met. This is why trial by juries try men based on the specific crime he's alleged to have committed, not on his arbitrary group membership in a group he never volunteered to join, and from which he cannot resign, even if he would. The jury trial is a carefully evolved social institution meant to reduce crime while acting as a check on the overreach of the police. Because the problem to be faced is real and specific, the institution evolved to combat it is likewise specific. It is not something the capitalists do that the Marxists wish to halt. It is the middle class the Marxist hates. It is the rich he wants dead. Likewise, the Jew for the National Socialist, the industrialist for the green, the patriarchy for the feminist, and white privilege for the race baiter. If every member of the group the activist wants to harm, he wants to harm not for anything the member does, but merely for what he is. What he is, in fact, is a scapegoat, an innocent bystander onto whose back is packed all the sins of the community. The means used to punish the scapegoats are and must be the opposite of trial by jury. The accusation must be vague. The accusation applies to groups, not individuals. Guilt is presumed before any facts are examined, and the facts are held to be irrelevant. Only the act of making the accusation matters. The thing is not being done to solve the problem allegedly threatening the community. The problem being solved here is personal. A spiritual problem of envy, and the mental problem of psychological projection. The fool wants a diploma, the heartless man wants an honorarium, and the coward wants a medal of honor. And they all want to be the wizard and have the masses quake before a booming voice. This is the way imaginary problems are met. Of course, going to a confessional booth is the only way in real life to address problems of envy and projection. Pretending these problems are caused by Heffalumps merely makes the Heffalumps all the larger.